General Assembly to serve as Tennessee's 37th Secretary of State in 2009 and re-elected in 2013, 2017, and 2021. Secretary Hargett is the Chief Executive Officer of the Department of State with oversight of more than 300 employees. He also serves on numerous boards and commissions, on 2 of which he is the presiding member. The services and oversight found in the Secretary of State's office reach every department and agency in the state government. A native of Ripley, Secretary Hargett now lives in Hendersonville with his wife Dawn and their 2 sons. He's a Southern Baptist and attends Indian Lake Peninsula Church. The Blount County Republican Party, the women, Blount County Republican women and the YRs are very excited to have you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Appreciate the I'm glad we were finally able to work this out, and I thought that Mother Nature was conspiring against us, that I wasn't going to get the opportunity. So delighted to be here and see so many old friends, make a few new ones. I hate that Congressman Burchett left. I was going to say something really nice about him. Now he's left, I'm not going to. No, I'm kidding aside. Tim and I go way back to when I first got elected to the House in 1996. I served 10 years in the House of Representatives, and Tim's time in the House overlapped mine some. Of course, I was still in the House when he was in the Senate. And, you know, I just want to say, I'm grateful that people like Tim Burchett are willing to go to Washington, D.C. And he was sitting there saying, I'd rather be here. Tim Burchett would rather be here than in Washington, D.C. I know that. And you know, anybody that hasn't known someone who has served in D.C. or in Nashville, what I would point out is, it comes to my mind, because I was in Fayette County last week. And I had someone there criticize the congressman down there. And I said, you know, I looked at the state senator from there, the state representative. I said, do we agree on everything? And we're like, well, no, we don't agree on everything. None of us do. My wife and I don't agree on everything. It's a hard job. Being in these positions, so many times you make binary decisions. They are yes or no. They are not as simple as saying, well, I kind of like this, but I don't like that, and so I can just kind of split the baby. And sometimes it's a binary decision. You have to vote yes, you have to vote no, and the people who are willing to get in the ring and make those decisions, I'm grateful for Tim Burchett and so many of us like him. We're fortunate here in Tennessee that we've got a lot of great leaders, and so I wish he was here to hear me praise him and that. I'm grateful for him. So, why am I here? It's election year. I don't know if y'all know that or not. It's presidential election year, and I'm going to trot out this tried and true statement here that people always make during election years. Most important election of our lifetime. But you know, it is. It is. You know, what Congressman Burchett said a moment ago is we got 2 things. We got to pray and we got to vote. And we can ill afford to stay home in this upcoming election. One of the things we're talking a lot about right now is the Your Vote Matters program that our office has rolled out. Because as the Secretary of State of the state of Tennessee, who's also a Republican, there's going to be a lot of people that over the coming months, as we lead up to November, who are going to decide they're either going to listen to me because they agree with my politics, or they're going to say, I don't agree with this politics, I'm not going to listen to them. But we all have our respective spheres of influence. We have the people we go to church with. We have the people we know from different civic clubs. We know people, have family members and friends throughout the community. We have got to encourage others to go and vote. Tennessee ranks near the bottom when it comes to voter registration numbers and voter participation numbers. If every one of us would get committed to try to register one more voter and get one more person to go and vote, then we could go from the bottom in voter registration and voter participation to the very top. So in our Your Vote Matters program, we're trying to encourage people to understand that their vote, in fact, does matter. What Congressman Burchett talked about a while ago is we had, you know, so many millions of conservatives across this country that had the opportunity to have flipped the U.S. Senate, to widen the margins in our United States Congress. And instead, we didn't do that. People stayed at home. You know, and the same could hold true here in Tennessee. We're fortunate. You know, in Tennessee, we're a low-tax, low-debt state. You know, when you look at our higher education system, our K-12 education system, we are on a positive trajectory. We got a lot of fantastic things going on in our state, but those things could change in a hurry. if we don't continue to go and vote for people who are going to continue that positive trajectory. As y'all well know, we've had judicial races that have ended in ties in this state in the last decade. We've had a couple of legislative seats that have been decided by a handful of votes. We had a congressional race a few years back that was decided by less than one vote per precinct. And we got a lot of elected officials in this room. And I will tell you, one of the worst things you hear after an election, if you lost especially, but if you're in a close election, when somebody comes up to you and says, you know, if I'd known it was going to be that close, I'd have gone and voted. And you really just want, at that point, when you're an elected official, you want to take your hands from right here and move them up to here and put them around your neck, because you really want people to understand that these elections have consequences. They do. And you know, if we're going to continue to be a low tax, low debt state where things are going well here in the state of Tennessee, we have to continue to make sure, once again, we send people to local politics and in national Washington, D.C. to make sure that we can continue the trajectory that we have here in Tennessee. So I mentioned that your vote matters, and I mentioned how races have ended in ties, and I tell you, I see a Representative Ramsey signing. It's good to see you, Representative.
Your Eminence.
Good to see you. Miss you. Good to see you. So, you know, that threw me off when I saw you walk in the room. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, when people say, well, my vote doesn't matter, and I had this conversation with a college student a few years back, and I said to her, I said, you know, you say your vote doesn't matter. I said, she told me, so I'm just not going to vote. And I thought I'd try reverse psychology. By the way, I've got a 21-year-old and a 16-year-old. I looked at her and I said, good, you shouldn't. And she kind of rocked back. She said, I can't even say that to me. And I said, when you don't go vote, that makes me that much more powerful. I said, when you don't go vote, I said, you amplify my vote. I said, so if you want to let me pick all the leaders, that's great, because I trust me. I don't know how you're going to vote. And the bottom line is, we need to find also people who see the world the way we see it, and go out and talk to people, not just ask them to go vote, but tell them why it's important that they go vote. And we got a lot of people who are moving here from other places. You know, I hear these strange accents. We may have some in this room. Welcome. What I would say to you is, if you haven't been here very long and you haven't voted in an election here, but certainly if you haven't voted in an election here before, you know, I just want to tell you, welcome to freedom and liberty in this state. All right? Welcome to freedom and liberty. Don't come here and screw it up. We got a lot of great things going on. They happen where intentionally in this state we have erred on the side of freedom and liberty. And so that's why the election matters. That's why your vote matters. But one of the concerns I really have, I think we passed out a few handouts. There's a facts and figures, by the way. That's good for doodling on if you get bored while I'm talking, or you want to have something else to read while I'm talking. But there's also a one-pager on election integrity. 2 years in a row, Tennessee has been ranked by the Heritage Foundation as #1 in the country for election integrity. So don't take my word for it. Take the Heritage Foundation's word for it, all right? And there's not one secret thing in the sauce. There's a lot of things that go into that. And so we're very proud that hopefully we're going to be #1 for a 3rd year in a row. We're hopeful to hear that any day now. And so one of the things that's been frustrating for me, certainly in the wake of the 2020 election, and the 2022 election, you know, I have people call me and they'll ask me all kinds of questions about election integrity, and certainly after the 2020 election, I had a lot of people call and want to have conversations, and I welcome those conversations. It's interesting. I'd have one person call me telling me how Russia tried to interfere in our elections. I got news for you. Russia tries to interfere in elections everywhere. Okay? They're not going to stop. Our foreign adversaries are not going to stop. And I have one person who tell me how back in 2016 that Trump owed his election to Russia. And I'm like, are you hearing yourself talk? I mean, we've heard all the testimony and everything. But then I'd have on the other phone somebody call me in 2020 and say how the election was rigged and all these different things. And let me just tell you, okay, what happened in 2020? It's not about the machines, all right? What happened, and it could have happened here too, is what happened is we saw election officials around this country, secretaries of state, statewide coordinators of elections, attorney generals in some cases, governors, who made a decision that in the name of a pandemic, that they could just take their state laws and set them to the side and say, well, we've always wanted to have complete by mail voting. Now's our opportunity. And so we're going to do that in the name of the pandemic. And so we're not going to have in-person voting, or we're going to extend the amount of time that it takes for ballots to get in. And it was a great opportunity for a lot of those states to be able to do things that their law didn't allow them to do. But just take our word for it, they would say, we're going to try something new. And in fact, I was on a conference call one day with Republican secretaries of state. And there's a former Secretary of State of Washington State, Kim Wyman, who was the only statewide Republican elected official on the entire West Coast. And she had been, in Washington, they've been doing by-mail balloting for years. They've got their system down, it works for them, but it took them some time to get it right. And she told all of us Republican secretaries of state that day, she says, you cannot flip a switch and run a good election if you're going to try and do all by-mail balloting. And we heard that in Tennessee. You know, and when the tornadoes were hitting in Davidson County and Putnam County and Wilson counties on Super Tuesday 4 years ago, we're watching TV that evening. We've been up since 3 in the morning and watching TV, and we're seeing all the things that are happening with the pandemic in New York and California and others. And I look at my court of elections, Mark Goins, who's an East Tennessean, or in Campbell County, who we're talking. I said, hey, we got to have a plan. If this is how we're going to have to run an election, we're going to have a plan. And he looked at me and he says, okay, we got to have a plan. He said, you're right, but whatever we do, we're going to follow our law. And I was sitting there thinking at that point, man, you're being kind of Captain Obvious about that. Yeah, of course we're going to follow our law. Little did I know the onslaught that was going to occur from those who wanted us to mail out absentee ballots, to put up drop boxes, and so many different things they want us to do in the name of the pandemic that we decided not to do. And in fact, one of the things that came up was absentee ballots. The people who want us to mail an absentee ballot to everybody and have no excuse absentee voting, they want us to do that. And we said, well, we've got 14 different reasons that you can get an absentee ballot, and just saying fear of COVID is not one of them. And so, you know, now honestly in Tennessee, as our election commissioners in the room know this, you know, 14 different reasons, and if you say that you're sick, you know, it's up to you. You're signing that form under penalty of perjury, but you know, it's up to you if you say you're sick, whether or not you're sick. And so we told people, said, look, you are the determiner of your own health, but that wasn't good enough for them. They took us to court, had a judge threaten to throw me in jail because I said fear of COVID wasn't a reason to vote absentee. And in fact, they skewered me in the U.S. Senate Rules Committee. I mean, I had Angus King and Amy Klobuchar wearing me out in a Senate hearing. And in fact, Angus King just said, that's pathetic. Well, what happened was we stayed the course. And while other states were having all of these discrepancies about how the votes were coming in and being counted and everything, because we made that difficult decision, what should have been a difficult decision, hey, we're just going to follow our laws and not color outside the lines, things worked out here in Tennessee. And that's why we have elections that are run with integrity. But when I would get these phone calls, I have one lady that sticks out in my mind, called me from Chattanooga, and she is very politely asking me all these different questions. I answer every one of them for her. She says, well, I don't think we need to have drop boxes in the state of Tennessee. I said, man, we don't. We don't allow drop boxes in the state of Tennessee. In fact, you're responsible for your own ballot. We check when that absentee ballot goes out. Before it even goes out, we check your signature against the voter file. Then we check your signature when the absentee ballot comes back in. We now watermark those absentee ballots as another layer of security against counterfeit ballots. You're responsible for your own. We don't put them in a drop box. We sure don't have unsecured drop boxes like they do in some other states. I told her, I answered questions like that. She says, we need photo ID. I said, ma'am, we had photo ID back in 2010. That's when we started doing photo ID here in the state of Tennessee. And I walked through all those things, and she finally said, you know, you sound like a really nice guy. I just don't know that I trust you. And I said, well, ma'am, I said, you know, you hurt my feelings a little bit. I said, because what's amazing right now is, I know we got at least one election commissioner room. Where are there other election commissioners in it? Okay. So one of the things that's tough is that the people who are running elections in your county, It's a bipartisan group of people. Believe it or not, Republicans keep an eye on Democrats, Democrats keep an eye on Republicans. They program the machines together. They welcome you together. They may fight or give you an I voted sticker together. They are involved in counting the absentee ballots together, doing all those things together. They keep an eye on one another. And by the way, they are Blount Countyans here in Blount County. We don't bring them in from Knox County or Loudoun County to run your elections, as good of people as those are. These are people who live here. They are people you see at football games, you see them at the grocery store, you see them at church, you see them throughout the community. We sure as heck don't bring them in from other states. We sure as heck don't bring them in from Russia, Iran, North Korea, or China. These are a bipartisan group of people running your elections, and you ought to be able to trust them. And I told this lady from Hamilton County that day. I said, you know, you're watching somebody on YouTube or watching somebody who's trying to sell pillows, and and you're looking at all that, and by the way, they've got a donate button on their YouTube channel or whatever. They say, hey, I need you to give money to make sure I'm fighting for election integrity. I said, meanwhile, your local election officials, your state election officials, and your legislators, they're fighting for integrity each and every day to make sure we do it the right way in the state of Tennessee. And so a few other things I'm going to mention to you, and all of this is on that white piece of paper. And by the way, we've got several more of those. If you ever want us to send you any, they're great conversation pieces for like Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, Easter Sunday, things like that. First time somebody says something about election integrity, you just practice like, everybody play rook, anybody in the room play rook? You just imagine that's the big red one, you slam it down the table, okay? So, you know, our election machines are not connected to the internet, all right? They're not connected to the internet. And then I have people say, well, they must be capable of them. No, actually in Tennessee, whenever your local election commission buys machines, part of that RFP is to make sure that they're not allowed to have internet connectivity, okay? And by the way, all those machines are on display and available for public viewing and testing before elections in a bipartisan way, all right? And when I say they're not connected to the internet, on election night, when those votes are being counted, there is not a connection from those machines to some server in Venezuela or Townsend, all right? They're not connected somewhere. How many times y'all think Venezuela and Townsend ever been mentioned in the same sentence? All right, we made history tonight, first time ever. All right, so there's a process, a certification process that happens at the election to certify the results of that election. But on election night, as the machines are coming from across the county and then up to and the votes don't ever actually come to the state. So there's somebody here at the Blount County Election Commission who is manually typing in numbers that goes into an unofficial portal, and we populate our website with that information. Anybody in this room ever balanced a checkbook? Okay, I'm sorry. All right, we're Republicans, of course we have. All right. It took some of y'all a second. It took y'all a second. All right? And so anybody ever made a checkbook error?
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? It gets fixed when you reconcile your checkbook, doesn't it? Think of the certification process as reconciling that. But I'll give you a real life story. During the, not the most recent gubernatorial election, one before that, is on election night, there was one county that all of a sudden the numbers came in and we thought, wow, there's no way that number can be right. There's not that many voters in the county. Somebody had added an extra digit to the number that they typed in. So it showed somebody essentially get like 100,000 votes when he got like 10,000. We had to call a gubernatorial candidate that night and say, hey, just so you don't freak out over this, but your vote totals are about to drop significantly in the next few minutes because somebody made a keying error on our website. By the way, though, I mentioned that website result is unofficial. Even if they'd never caught that, it would have gotten caught in the certification process, all right? And so, and the important thing is you're going to hear me talk a lot about that in November and leading up to the November election is that website being unofficial, the local website's unofficial. That certification process is very important because can you imagine if in 2016 or even 2020, if I had on our website all of a sudden it showed Joe Biden winning Tennessee, and then I came back within 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, said, oh, somebody made a keying error and now Trump's really winning Tennessee. Can you imagine the outcry that would have occurred? And that's, so people need to understand it's an unofficial thing, and by the way, it's not connected to CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Telemundo, any of that, okay? If you're watching a ticker at the bottom of the screen, that's totally separate from what we are doing. Those media outlets have stringers from around the country who are watching those results and collecting them at the polling sites. They're not collecting that information from us. They're not collecting it in real time. And by the way, whenever somebody projects the winner, while we're still counting votes, I have nothing to do with that, okay? I know a lot of people think I'm a very powerful person. Don't believe that. Yes. Fox News doesn't wait for me to call.